The transmission echoed across the galaxy, its message simple, unwavering, and terrifying. We were polite once. We won't be polite again. At first, the Exarith Dominion laughed. They had conquered empires spanning the Milky Way for over 60,000 years. No species had ever truly resisted them, only delayed the inevitable. But then, their warships stopped responding. Their AI war cores flickered and went silent. Their planetary strongholds, once thought invincible, collapsed in seconds without a single human ship being detected in orbit. The Dominion had assumed Earth was another primitive world. Humanity was not primitive. They had simply been waiting. The ultimatum came in the form of a cold transmission. No greetings. No formalities. Just raw, undeniable arrogance. This is Supreme Overlord RHA Zal of the Exarith Dominion. Your planet, designated Earth, is now under our control. You will submit to Dominion rule. There will be no negotiations. Refusal will result in extermination. The War Council chamber fell into silence. The message replayed, hollow and artificial, each syllable dripping with centuries of unchallenged superiority. Elias Voss exhaled, slow and measured, like a predator waiting for the kill. The arrogance, he muttered, leaning back in his chair. They don't even ask. They don't demand. They assume. Across the table, Fleet Marshal Kane frowned, fingers tapping the steel surface. That's what makes them dangerous. They're not bluffing, Elias. This isn't some two-bit empire waving a knife at us. This is the Dominion. They don't talk before they crush. Voss smirked. Then they've made their first mistake. The room tensed. Kane's brow furrowed. What? They think we're scared. Voss leaned forward, eyes gleaming. They think we don't know what they are. Silence. President Langford cleared his throat. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of steel beneath it. They control over 500 star systems. They've raised entire species into footnotes in galactic history. They think we're next. I need to hear from my military advisors. What's our move? A murmur of shifting bodies filled the chamber. Kane looked grim. Admiral Cho crossed her arms, shaking her head. The analysts exchanged glances, their screens flooded with incoming reports. The numbers were overwhelming. 100,000 warships. Autonomous battle swarms. Planet-cracking orbital siege platforms. Numbers that had shattered civilizations in mere weeks. Earth was next. Voss sighed and stood, placing both hands on the table. All right, listen up. We could sit here and weigh the pros and cons. We could tally our fleets, calculate the loss percentages, simulate 50 different invasion scenarios. But let me tell you exactly what's going to happen. The entire War Council turned to him. They're going to send their first wave, expecting surrender. We don't surrender. They'll get frustrated. They'll escalate. We still don't break. Then, they'll finally deploy their full force. He paused, letting the weight settle. And that's when we remind them exactly why we've been so damn polite for so long. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Kane scoffed. You talk like we've already won. Voss's smirk widened. Kane, we won this war before they even sent the message. Cho raised an eyebrow. You're assuming they're not prepared for us. Oh, they're prepared. Voss nodded. They've modeled their war doctrine against every species they've ever encountered. The problem? They've never encountered us. He gestured at the holomap displaying the Dominion fleet movements. They expect a conventional war. Ships against ships. Firepower against firepower. That's why they win. Every time. They're a hammer, and the rest of the galaxy keeps handing them nails. Langford exhaled. And what are we? Voss's grin was predatory. We're the thing that rips the hammer from their hands and beats them to death with it. Silence. Then, Langford leaned back, arms crossed. Explain. Voss tapped the console. The holomap shifted, displaying an intricate web of Dominion vulnerabilities. Logistics routes. Cybernetic relay hubs. Fleet coordination nodes. This is why we've been weak. Why we've been passive. He tapped his temple. We've been learning. Kane stared at the display. His eyes narrowed. These are their entire strategic command lines. Voss nodded. Their supply chains. Their AI relays. Their automated command hierarchies. Every single thread they've used to weave their empire together. Cho's breath hitched. How the hell did we get this data? Voss's grin was razor sharp. You think I spent 20 years negotiating for peace? A stunned pause. Then Kane barked a laugh. You crazy bastard! Voss simply shrugged. Langford pressed his fingers together. And what do we do with this information? We cut the strings. Voss's voice was cold. We don't fight their fleets, we erase them. We don't defend planets, we make sure they never reach them. Langford studied him for a long moment. You're suggesting preemptive action? I'm suggesting, Voss said smoothly, that we give them one last warning. Langford considered. Then nodded. Approved. Voss turned to the comms officer. Send it. A single message was transmitted across the Dominion's networks. We strongly advise you to walk away. Deep in the Xareth Dominion command vessel, Supreme Overlord RHA Zal reviewed the response. His mechanical tendrils coiled in amusement. The message was laughable. Humans had no standing in the galactic hierarchy. Their fleet was minuscule. Their empire non-existent. Yet, there was something unsettling about the simplicity of their response. No plea. No negotiations. Just a warning. A lesser mind might have hesitated. But RHA Zal was not lesser. He was Xareth. With a flick of his tendrils, he activated the fleet-wide transmission. Earth has refused compliance. Initiate planetary siege formation. Humanity will be erased. Back on Earth, Elias Voss watched as the first Dominion warships entered the Sol system. He exhaled slowly. Then he smiled. They should have walked away. The Dominion fleet surged into Sol space with the precision of a machine. Thousands of warships, perfectly aligned, their dark hulls blotting out the stars. Command codes pulsed between them, synchronized like a hive mind, cold and absolute. The lead vessel, Vorzon, relayed its final warning across every human frequency. Your resistance is irrelevant. Submit or perish. Elias Voss stood in the War Council chamber, hands clasped behind his back, watching the invasion unfold on the holodisplay. He tilted his head slightly, listening to the nervous chatter of officers around him, but his expression remained unreadable. The air was thick with tension. President Langford's voice cut through the room. Are we in position? Admiral Cho gave a sharp nod. Everything's set. The fleet's on standby, but... She hesitated. Sir, we're still reading zero weapons activations from the enemy. They're holding position. Voss smirked. They're waiting for us to beg. Fleet Marshal Kane exhaled sharply. Hell of a way to break an empire. Langford turned to Voss. Final confirmation. Are we doing this? Voss didn't hesitate. Flip the switch. Across Earth's defense grid, the command was executed. The Dominion fleet, still waiting for humanity's desperate response, was unaware of what had already happened. In the void of space, invisible pulses rippled outward. Quantum disruption waves, undetectable by Dominion sensors, laced through their formations. The first warning sign came in the form of silence. The Xareth Dominion was built on absolute technological dominance, their vast neural networks coordinating every movement, every strike, with mechanical efficiency. But efficiency had a flaw: it required connection. And at this moment, the connection was gone. Across their fleet, ships flickered. Entire capital vessels lost power. Automated warforms froze in place. The collective AI, the godlike intelligence that orchestrated their every decision, went dark. Inside Vorzon, Supreme Overlord RHA Zal's cybernetic mind screamed in error. His tendrils flailed as he attempted to re-establish control, but the neural pathways were dead. He tried to send commands to his warships, nothing. He tried to activate failsafes, nothing. And then the human response came. A simple transmission. Goodbye. The first Dominion warship detonated in a silent flash of light. Then another. And another. The trap had been laid centuries ago. Humanity had never needed to match the Dominion's firepower. They had only needed to understand how to break them. For decades, sleeper viruses had infected the Dominion's data streams, learning, waiting, adapting. When the moment came, they struck like a silent guillotine. Power grids overloaded. Warp cores detonated. Vessels designed to withstand planetary sieges crumbled from within. Panic spread like wildfire. The Dominion had never known panic. It was glorious. Back in the War Council chamber, Voss watched with cold satisfaction. The greatest fleet the galaxy had ever known was dying without firing a single shot. Admiral Cho's voice was tight with disbelief. Their command structure is disintegrating. Marshal Kane let out a slow breath. I'll be damned. Langford turned to Voss, his expression unreadable. How long have you been planning this? Voss's eyes never left the display. Since the first time I shook their hands. Across the void, the strongest force in the galaxy burned. But it wasn't enough. Because Elias Voss was not here to win a battle. He was here to end a war. He stepped forward, activating a direct transmission to the shattered remains of the Dominion fleet. Supreme Overlord HFY, he said, voice calm, measured, but carrying the weight of something ancient, something final. I know you can hear me. A flickering image appeared, a garbled mess of machine and failing code. HFY was afraid. Voss leaned in. Tell me something. How does it feel? Silence. How does it feel? Voss continued. To stand on the other side of the extermination order? How does it feel to watch your people vanish before your eyes? HFY's broken voice rasped, struggling against the inevitable. You were supposed to be weak? Voss chuckled. And you were supposed to be invincible. HFY's form twitched violently. You don't understand what you've done. Voss raised an eyebrow. Oh, I understand perfectly. You thought war was about power. It's not. It's about leverage. HFY spasmed, trying and failing to regain control. But Voss wasn't done. You assumed we fought like the others, he said softly. That we would meet you in battle. That we would bleed against you until we had nothing left. But we're not here to prove a point. He leaned closer. We're here to bury you. Another explosion rocked the Dominion fleet. Entire formations collapsed into burning wreckage. And then, Elias Voss delivered the final blow. We never wanted this war, he said. But now, we're going to make sure no one remembers your name. The transmission cut. And the Dominion died. The silence on the bridge of the Vorzon was deafening. Supreme Overlord HFY's consciousness flickered in and out of stability, his neural pathways overloaded with cascading failures. The Dominion's mighty war machine, flawless, absolute, undefeated, was crumbling before his very eyes. His synthetic voice crackled. This is impossible. But it wasn't. The humans had hollowed out his empire without ever firing a shot. Every warship, every command node, every fleet relay was compromised. They had dismantled the strongest force in the galaxy like a predator peeling apart its prey. And Elias Voss was the predator. A transmission flickered onto HFY's failing display. The human leader stood with that same expression, not arrogant, not mocking. Inevitable. I assume you understand now, Voss said evenly. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't luck. This was always the outcome. HFY's cybernetic body twitched violently, struggling against system collapse. You cannot destroy the Dominion. Voss gave a small, almost pitying smile. HFY, the Dominion no longer exists. You're just the last one to realize it. Another shockwave rippled through the remains of the once mighty fleet. Core reactors overloaded, ships detonating in synchronized bursts of flame. 100,000 warships, erased in mere minutes. HFY's mind raced. It made no sense. The Dominion had prepared for every scenario, had conquered worlds before these humans even developed spaceflight. Their firepower alone should have reduced Earth to ash. Yet the war never even started. You fight, with dishonor, RHA Zhao rasped. Voss chuckled, shaking his head. That's the problem with you Dominion types. You think war is about honor, about proving who's stronger. You think it's about standing toe-to-toe like some gladiatorial contest. His voice hardened. It's not. War is about winning. And that's what we did before you even knew we were fighting. RHA Zhao's failing processors refused to accept it. We are the apex, we cannot. You were the apex, Voss corrected. Past tense. His voice dropped, cold and certain. You wanted a show of strength. You got a lesson in extinction. A new alarm blared across the shattered Dominion comms. The Vorzan's remaining systems reported catastrophic failure. The fleet's AI cores were beyond recovery. And the final blow? The Exarith homeworld had gone dark. The data feed blinked erratically, showing the impossible, their capital planet gone. Not invaded. Not occupied. Just gone. RHA Zhao's body spasmed violently. What have you done? Voss's gaze sharpened. We gave your people a choice. RHA Zhao's decaying mind barely processed the words. A choice? They had 24 hours to decide their future. Voss said. Surrender, stand down, and they live. Keep fighting, and they vanish with the rest of your empire. His expression darkened. Guess which option they picked? RHA Zhao let out something between a snarl and a mechanical death rattle. He tried to speak, but his voice was drowned in static. His empire had not just been defeated, it had been erased. Humanity hadn't conquered. They hadn't occupied. They had ended the Dominion. Why? RHA Zhao's voice barely functioned now. You could have ruled. Voss exhaled, shaking his head. You still don't get it. We don't want to rule. His gaze was iron, unshaken. We just wanted to be left alone. Another violent tremor. More Dominion vessels self-destructed, their systems beyond recovery. RHA Zhao's world collapsed into red warning lights and fragmented data streams. He was running out of time. Voss leaned in slightly, his voice a whisper, the last thing RHA Zhao would ever hear. This was a warning. The transmission cut. RHA Zhao ceased to exist. And across the galaxy, the name Exarith became nothing more than a memory. The Dominion was gone. Their war fleets lay in ruin, their command networks reduced to static, their homeworld erased from existence. The strongest in the galaxy had fallen, and the stars had gone silent. In the War Council chamber, Elias Voss stood at the center of it all, arms folded, watching the final data feeds of the dying Dominion. Their destruction had not come from a great battle. No grand war had been fought. There had been no fight. Marshal Kane leaned against the table, exhaling in disbelief. Just like that. It's over. Admiral Cho's gaze was locked on the holo display. I still don't believe it. Langford's voice was quiet, almost reverent. Believe it. Voss remained still, watching as the last Dominion warship disintegrated into nothing. He had known this was how it would end. The Exarith had never been humanity's greatest threat. They had only been an obstacle, one that had now been removed. The chamber was heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. Humanity had not just won. They had erased the concept of losing. Kane turned to Voss. So what now? Voss exhaled. He had spent decades planning for this moment, orchestrating every piece of the game board, setting every domino in place. And yet, even he knew, this wasn't the end. No, he said simply. We prepare. Cho frowned. For what? The Dominion is done. The galaxy is free. Voss's eyes remained locked on the screen. And that's exactly why we need to be ready. Langford studied him carefully. You think someone else is coming? Voss nodded once. We didn't just destroy the Dominion. We shattered the status quo. His voice was steady, calm, but carrying the weight of something vast. The balance of power in the galaxy wasn't just built on strength. It was built on fear. He turned, facing them fully. The Dominion wasn't strong because they were the greatest warriors. They were strong because everyone believed they were unbeatable. That belief kept the galaxy in check. Now, he gestured to the display, to the smoldering wreckage of a once great empire. We just proved they could fall. Cho's voice was quiet. Which means someone else is going to try and take their place. Voss nodded. And they'll be looking directly at us. Kane muttered a curse under his breath. Hell of a mess we just made. Langford was silent for a long moment, then finally spoke. You were right. We won the war before it started. But this isn't over. No, Voss agreed. It's just beginning. A long pause. The weight of the moment settled over the room. Humanity had emerged victorious. But in doing so, they had announced themselves to the universe in the loudest way possible. Langford straightened. All right. We adapt. We move forward. What's our next step? Voss met his gaze. We reinforce the colonies. We fortify our borders. We take everything we learn from this war and we scale it. Kane scoffed. You're talking like we're about to fight another war. Voss gave a small, humorless smirk. I'm talking like we're about to fight every war. The room fell silent. They all understood. Humanity had just changed the galaxy forever. And the galaxy was about to respond. The incoming transmission arrived exactly as expected. Langford's aide rushed into the room, face pale. Sir? You're going to want to see this. The War Council turned as the holoscreen flickered to life. A transmission, encrypted beyond standard protocols, broadcasting from deep space. The figure that appeared was not Exarith. Voss's jaw clenched. He had been waiting for this. The voice came through, distorted but clear. You should not have done this, human. Langford's gaze sharpened. Who are we speaking to? There was a pause, then the voice continued. The ones your enemy feared more than you. And now you have our attention. The air in the room grew heavy. Voss exhaled slowly. Then, with a smirk, he leaned forward. Good. And he cut the transmission. The room remained silent long after the transmission cut. The weight of those final words hung in the air. You have our attention. Elias Voss leaned against the war table, fingers drumming against the cold surface. Every instinct in his body screamed that this was the real moment, the one he had been waiting for. The Dominion had never been the endgame, it had been a prologue. Langford exhaled. Who the hell was that? Admiral Cho shook her head. No known markers. No recorded signature. It wasn't Dominion tech. Kane's fists clenched. And they just watched us tear the strongest empire in the galaxy apart. Voss straightened. Exactly. A tense pause. Then Langford folded his hands. We need answers. Now. Cho hesitated. If they're watching us, they're ahead of us. This transmission means one thing, they were waiting. Voss nodded. And now that the Dominion is gone, the real apex predators just stepped forward. Kane scoffed. We haven't even finished burning the last Empire's corpse, and another one is lining up? Voss smirked. No. This one never left. Langford's jaw tightened. We need to trace that signal. The tech officer scrambled, pulling every asset, dissecting encryption layers, but the transmission left no trail. Whoever sent it wanted them to know it came from nowhere, from everywhere. Then, a second message arrived. No visuals. No names. Just one simple line. Your war has only begun. Voss chuckled. They're not subtle, I'll give them that. Kane frowned. So what's the play? Voss exhaled, stepping forward. We don't react. We don't flinch. We prepare. The Dominion fell because they thought they were untouchable. We don't make that mistake. Langford studied him. You think we can fight something we know nothing about? We don't need to fight them, Voss said smoothly. We need to make them hesitate. Cho narrowed her eyes. And how do we do that? Voss smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. We send them a message of our own. The War Council stared as Voss pulled up the final transmission sent to the Dominion before their fall. The one that shattered the most feared empire in history. He adjusted the transmission frequency, overriding every known galactic comm relay. Then he pressed send. The words echoed across the void. Across uncharted systems. Across the shadows where unknown forces waited. We were polite once. We won't be polite again. And for the first time, the Watchers hesitated.